reciprocal tariffs by 115% for 90 days. US Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent confirmed the agreement after marathon trade talks in Geneva. Here's what he said.
We have reached an agreement on a 90-day pause and substantially moved down the tariff levels. Both sides on the reciprocal tariffs will move their tariffs down 115%.
A joint statement says both nations will cut tariffs sharply, with the US slashing rates from 145 to 30% and China cutting them from 125 to 10%. Markets surged as the news came. Hong Kong's Hang Seng Index jumped over 3%, while the US Wall Street futures also spiked, boosting global optimism. Both sides hail substantial progress. Chinese Vice Premier He Lifeng called it important consensus, with WTO chief Ngozi Ojogo-Iweala welcoming the positive outcome and urging continued dialogue. Meanwhile, China's Foreign Minister Wang Yi hosted Latin American leaders in Beijing ahead of the CELAC summit. This is part of China's push for closer global ties amid these trade tensions. A consultation mechanism has also been established to prevent future escalations. We're now joined by Quinton A. Hitchcock, US affairs expert located in Texas, to discuss this further. Thank you very much, Quinton, for joining us. A 115% drop on tariffs for both countries. This is a substantial development. Is this a win for both of the world's largest economies?
Yeah, I think it's a temporary win, and it's good to be with you, Thomas. I've heard economists describe this as a manufactured tariff agreement, meaning this doesn't really address any of the key issues that can assure a long-term solution for both countries. So it's certainly a temporary component. I would characterize it as a win for both countries, but I think this is also coming at an interesting time. The Trump White House desperately needs a win on the economy. We know right now that their handling of the economy, President Trump's handling of the economy specifically, is polling very, very low amongst American voters. So I think that was definitely at the top of his mind. That's always a top priority for the president is his poll numbers and specifically how he is handling things like global trade and the economy. And then another aspect of this is his trip coming up to the Middle East. I think that the timing of that was everything for the president. I think that explains why he was so aggressive in not necessarily coming to a tariff agreement with China, because we know this was temporary, but really coming out with an announcement. I think that he wanted to boast that and look as powerful as he could, which I'm not sure if that accomplishes what he set out to do, but his trip to the Middle East, I think, expedited this entire process.
Yes, and Quinton, do you think that both Washington and Beijing might fear that they might appear weak after they both seceded 115% of tariffs each?
Yeah, the number of this to me doesn't make a lot of sense. This doesn't address the manufacturing concern that the president has voiced for many years. So, I sit back and kind of wonder, okay, what does this accomplish, other than, for the next 90 days, hopefully global markets and American markets tend to soar a little bit. I think, recently, I think given all of the volatility that we've seen in the markets, the tariff conversation is directly responsible for that. So it's unclear what the short-term and the long-term goal is here. But to be very clear, this temporary agreement does not do anything to touch some of the key issues that are necessary for making a long-term trade deal with China.
Quinton, critics might say that this was announced in a grand grandeur, right? But would they say that maybe this is just fixing the mess that Donald Trump has made in regards to the economy? And as you've said previously, that they're not in any advancement. They're not in a better position than they were prior to when Donald Trump announced these tariffs.
Yeah, I think that's a very fair observation. I think Trump is kind of famous for course correcting. You know, he'll make certain decisions. Maybe he goes a little too far on a number of different issues. And this is nothing more than course correction. So I think that a lot of this is just undoing some of the instability, if you will, that our markets have seen as a result of the tariff conversation in general. But yeah, this is very perplexing. And you know, a couple days, rewind the tape just 2 or 3 days before our Treasury Secretary met with his Chinese counterparts, expectations for this were very, very low. So you know, I don't know that they were expecting certainly not expecting any kind of long-term deal, much less a short-term deal. So the fact that they're announcing this, I think Trump just wants to boast ahead of his Middle East trip. And I think he feels that that gives him a lot more leverage on the broader foreign policy front as it pertains to many, many different issues in many different countries.
Quinton A. Hitch.